Okay, now we move along to the exam specifics. Just to tell you a little bit about what to expect for the exam, it's 250 questions. 25 of those questions are what we refer to as beta questions, meaning they don't count for you or against you. And no, you don't get to choose which of those are beta. Those are already pre-selected. Now, you get 6 hours to complete the exam. To be honest with you, I don't even like to do something fun for 6 hours. My attention caps off right around 2 hours. And I hear there have been many fine movies. I hear Lord of the Rings was wonderful. Avatar was wonderful. But if you can't tell me your story in about an hour and 50 minutes, I've got no use for you. Now, the reason I say that is even for those that have much better attention spans than I have, this is a long, tedious process. I don't know of many people that enjoy a 6-hour exam. So one of the things I'm going to talk about this week is how to stay focused, how to keep your mind sharp, how to not waste your time on parts of the question that don't matter. And I really, if you're one of those people that finds yourself reading the same sentence again and again and again and not really digesting it, I'll encourage you to do some tricks and some tips that will help you along the way. So if you're like I am, as in, oh, look, a squirrel, I can help you with that. All right, now you can mark questions for review as you're taking the exam. So you go along and you find a question you want to think about a little bit, you can mark that question. I will still encourage you, though, put an answer down. You don't have an answer? C. C's just as good as anything. Go ahead and mark it. Do not leave any questions blank, because in the event that you run out of time, you've at least given yourself a shot at getting that question right by putting something. So what I would recommend is read the question, look at the answers, give it your best guess, mark it for review if you want to, and come back to it. Now, when you do mark questions for review, unless the sky's open and you hear a voice saying, change your answer, I would leave your answer as is. This is not the type of exam that you want to go back and redo, rethink. You're giving yourself a chance to overthink the question. This is definitely an exam of best practice. It's an exam of gut instinct. It's not one of those exams where you have to go 45 layers under the surface. So if something in you felt like the answer was B, unless you've had a clear indication that that's wrong, leave it as it is. I, generally speaking, do not change my answers. I don't mark answers. I don't go back for a review. This is an exam I would totally encourage you to move forward on, not backwards, okay? But do what you want. All right. You will be provided with one whiteboard, a laminated sheet of paper or laminated sheet. You'll get a Sharpie, and that is all you'll get. Actually, you'll get a Kleenex to erase it if you want, but they don't give you additional sheets. You have to make the most of it. There are some things that I think lend themselves to what we refer to as a brain dump. And a brain dump is when you walk in, you start your exam, and you just kind of unload those things that are on your mind. Maybe they might be things that you have difficulty remembering. Maybe there might be little mnemonic tricks you want to jot down. And again, I'm going to help you with those along the way. All right, you will have access to an on-screen calculator. Some will give you the choice of an on-screen or a real calculator, if you will. That'll be your choice, but not all testing centers do that, so don't count on it. Many of the testing centers also will give you headphones, noise-canceling headphones, or at least the little cheapo, squishy earplugs. Again, you can't always count on the testing center providing those resources, so if nothing else, they won't let you take headphones in, but maybe bring yourself a pair of those little squishy earphones, earplugs. And I'll tell you, in the testing center, there will be people other than CISSP exam takers. You'll have various different folks taking all sorts of different exams, and it can become very noisy as people are coming in and out. I always seem to sit behind or beside that person who's tapping their desk with their pen. You will have people shouting for joy when they pass or weeping loudly. Just bring yourself some earplugs. Questions are weighted. Now, remember, not all questions are created equal. As I mentioned in the previous material, there's certain topics like risk management, business continuity, cryptography, telecom, that you really, really want to be solid on. As a matter of fact, one of the phrases that's associated with ISC square is that security transcends technology. Security transcends technology. That's a very important idea, and it's absolutely true. What that means is technology comes and goes, but security and the principles behind security are there forever. And I think that's a very, very wise statement. And I think you'll find that's the heart and soul, the real core of this exam. So when you're looking at which question is going to be weighted more, is it going to be what block sizes does AES use? Or is it going to be what's the first step of risk management? Well, the risk management question is going to be much higher weighted, in my opinion. That's certainly what I would think based on ISC square. I will give you kind of a standard disclaimer now. I don't work with ISC square. They do not consult me when they write their questions. I have no inside knowledge, but I can tell you as somebody who's been teaching for a long time and has a good, strong success rate, I will tell you that the information that I pass along to you, I think is backed up with experience. All right, so the CISSP mindset. One of the things that I notice, and sometimes I'll have people that have taken the exam and failed before they come in and sit a boot camp. And a lot of people, gosh, I've been doing this for 13 years, 15 years, 50 years, whatever. I've been doing this for a long time. I can just go in and take this test. You may have the technical knowledge to take the test, but you may not have the right approach. You may not have the right mindset. And a lot of times I find really technical people get about a 650 on this exam. Sadly, you need 700 to pass. And in my opinion, the difference between that 650 for somebody that has knowledge and the passing score of 700 is not having the right mindset. The right mindset is so crucial. All right, so what makes that up? What's our approach? Well, the first thing, we have to understand our role on this exam. I'm not a technician. I'm not an architect. I'm not an engineer. I'm not a help desk person. I am a risk advisor. Think like a manager in this company. You're there to collect information and advise senior management on the risks as you see them. You are not a decision maker. You're an advisor. You're also not an actor in the situation, meaning rarely is the correct answer going to be for you to act. Usually it's collect information and inform. Okay? The second bullet point goes very closely there. Do not fix problems. Do not fix problems. Well, I don't know about you, but I personally am paid to fix problems. That's my job, right? I'm a problem solver. But not on this exam. I'm an advisor. So think about something like this. You have an employee that that management has decided to terminate. What is the first thing you should do? Okay, so immediately we think, well, we're going to revoke his accounts, we're going to revoke credentials. But remember, I'm a risk advisor. When's the last time your risk advisor has logged onto a server and revoked somebody's credentials? That shouldn't happen. That's a violation of separation of duties, right? So what does a risk advisor do? Make sure the proper policies and procedures are in place and inform the appropriate parties. And I know that feels very weird. We generally think of fixing problems. But a big focus of this class is going to be think about change control. Think about the process. Think long term. We're not running around putting Band-Aids on problems. We're making sure the processes are in place so the problems don't come up again. When I say don't fix problems, think about it this way. You've got Windows 10 on all your systems. You've just learned that there's a security vulnerability in Windows 10. Microsoft has just put out a patch. What do? Do you take that patch, download it, and push it out to 200 computers in production? I hope not. What do? You download it, you test it in the lab, you go through the proper processes. So do not fix problems, think about the process. Now, don't get me wrong. If they ask you, they tell you an employee's been terminated and he's scheduled to be terminated at noon, what should you do? If the answers are only action items, as in they would all require you to take action instead of consulting or informing, then yeah, revoke his credentials, absolutely. But I just want to stress, and for those of you that might work in the government, this might be easy for you. If there's an answer that involves bureaucracy and red tape, that's your answer. Go with that. Okay, who is responsible for security? That's a tricky question. Who is ultimately responsible for security? Senior management. Senior management is ultimately responsible for the security of an organization. And when you think about that as liable, right? If I'm an organization where I oversee a doctor's office, for instance, and one of my receptionists is party to a HIPAA compromise. That receptionist is likely not the one that's going to be hit with the fine. It's going to be me as the owner, the proprietor, or the senior manager. So when you think about who's ultimately responsible, think liability. Now, who's responsible for the day-to-day security mechanisms? Everyone is, right? But usually it's ultimately senior management. Their job is to create the policies, procedures, standards, guidelines. And then my job as an employee is to follow those. So, we want to kind of keep it clear that, yeah, everybody has a role to play in security, but the ultimate responsibility goes to senior management. All right, next thing to consider, how much security is enough? How much security is enough? And we've all been kind of trained to say, or we think, oh, you can never have enough security. Sure you can. Absolutely you can have enough, and you can have too much security. And if you don't agree with that, think for a minute. How many people watching this class, how many people do you think have a security guard that protects their front door at their home? And I can guarantee you the number of folks watching this class that do have a security guard patrolling their house are pretty small numbers. So why? I mean, it would be more secure if I did have a security guard. I can't afford it. You know why? Now, if I had 10,000 pounds of gold in my house, yeah, I could afford it. I can make that decision. So ultimately, the decision of how much security is enough, the answer is just enough. Now, be very careful here, because when I say just enough, immediately people think, oh, we're going to cut corners and just do what we can barely get away with. That's not the point I want to make. The point I want to make here is the amount of security that's necessary is driven by a cost-benefit analysis. What am I protecting and what's it worth? What's the potential value for loss and what's the cost of the countermeasure? Every decision with security really ultimately comes down to a risk decision, right? Value of my assets, probability of loss, impact of loss. Okay, so we'll get back into that, but that idea of cost-benefit analysis is huge here. You can absolutely have too much security, and the real answer of how much security is enough really is just enough. But one more point here. If I underestimate the value of my assets, right? Let's say I've got a laptop computer, and if I were to sell that laptop on Craigslist today, I might get 200 bucks for it. So if I say, well, the value of my laptop is 200 bucks, then if I don't take into account the value of the data on it, if I don't take into account maybe the intellectual property, maybe I've got healthcare information, I could be subjected to a $10,000 fine if that gets compromised. So the value of an asset comes from a whole lot of different places. It's not just the hardware. Having a true and complete understanding of the value of the asset is essential to making a good cost-benefit analysis. We'll talk about that in much more depth later. So the next bullet point, every decision we make starts with risk management. Value of the asset, probability of loss, impact of loss. Every decision starts with what am I protecting and what's it worth? Always the first step in risk management. Okay, next bullet point, security transcends technology. Security is so much bigger than the latest firewall, the latest algorithm, the latest mechanism, the latest this and that. Honestly, good foundational security principles will always have to be in place before any of the technology will work. And we'll look at instances where a company may be invested very heavily in firewalls or other technology, and yet because their basic principles were not solid, they still had security breaches. All right, physical safety is always the first choice on this exam. We can never lose sight of what's important, and protecting the life of our employees is always going to be first. Now, part of this exam will cover physical security. It's not a huge section, but that's true as well. But it's true that it's necessary as well. So always when you're looking at a situation, whether it comes up in disaster recovery and we're evacuating a building, whatever it may be, always think to save human life first. Even if you like the server better than the person you're saving, still choose the person over the server. Good rule. All right, technical questions are for managers. Managerial questions are for technicians. What that means is don't get too deep here. If you're a technician and you get a question and you're thinking about hacking the registry, you're going way too deep. Okay? If you're a manager and you're debating what the meaning of the word is, you're going way too deep in managerial stuff. The idea is, this is one of the phrases I think is most accurate about this exam: mile wide and an inch deep. So we're not going to get into modular math in order to discuss cryptography, but we're going to go over the general concepts. So if you find yourself going too deep, technical people, back up and see if there isn't a more general security answer founded in the principles of security. Okay. All right, incorporate security into the design as opposed to adding it on later. I'm going to say that 1,000,000 times. A friend of mine says security should be baked in instead of sprayed on. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. We should incorporate security every step of the process instead of doing the many things that we've done traditionally and just thought, oh, we better add security. For a long time, our functional baseline was, does it work? Now, our functional baseline is, does it work securely? Because if it doesn't work securely, then it doesn't work at all. All right, last piece, layered defense. Layer after layer after layer. There's no one single mechanism that will protect you, that will protect your data, will protect your facility. So what do? We have layers. And these layers are going to come through physical, administrative, and technical controls. Physical controls like door locks, security guards, administrative controls like policy, and then technical controls like firewalls and encryption and all those things. The important piece here is, if you see a question about how would you protect blah, 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 always try to find an approach or an answer that's layered. Yeah, you protect your data with encryption, but what would be great also would be to lock your laptop and have policies in place for separation of duties so that somebody that has no business on that system can't access it. I hope that makes sense. And if it doesn't, by the first chapter, you'll have it solid, because I'm going to say it 1,000,000 times. All right, so these things, if I were you, I cannot recommend this strongly enough. This might be something I print out. This might be something I jot down, and I would remind myself of these issues before I take the exam. For those of you that have been in the security realm for a long time, sometimes stepping back and not fixing problems, making sure senior management's ultimately responsible for security, watching out about how much security is enough. The best answer you can give is how much security is enough is driven by risk. Just some of these ideas, but I really want to stress to you, this is the heart and soul of the exam.